welcome to the Uninformed College Football Rants podcast, week 3, featuring our Miami football enthusiast and former UNC linebacker, Dan Fabricant.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
First we start with my personal top 10. 1 Georgia, 2 Michigan, 3 Bama, 4 SC, 5 Ohio State, 6 OU, 7 Miami, 8 Kentucky, 9 Arkansas, 10 Ole Miss, and the runner-ups are 11 Michigan State and 12 Texas.
Okay. That's rough on Alabama, huh? I mean, all they did was win, and you dropped them.
Yeah, but they took a hard almost loss, I'd say. So,
all right, I'm gonna jump to the side of the adverse side on this already. I mean, Texas is supposed to be in games like that, right? I mean, everyone's acting so surprised, like, wow, Texas hung close with Alabama. They're Texas. It's one of the most storied programs in college football. I don't get it. I don't know if that's disrespectful for Texas or maybe for Alabama, but I still think Bama's the best team in the country.
And to your point, it's not about Alabama underperforming. It's about Texas playing like Texas.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's like that's what people used to.
That's what they're supposed to do.
And they have one of the best running backs in the country, if not the best, in Bijan Robinson. And Quinn Ewers showed some promise even though he got injured. And Sarkisian, former Saban assistant, so
Right, and the defense was great. And look, here's the other thing. Texas played at home, right? They say, depending on who you believe in Vegas, home games in the regular season are worth anything from 3 to 6 points, right? So, this is, I think the big thing everybody should have gotten out of that game is everyone in the stadium, everyone who was watching knew that Texas left too much time on the clock for Alabama.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So, but even though everyone knew that, they're still going to take a swipe at Alabama. I don't get it. But hey, Georgia's a great team. Georgia may be going to be better than next year. So, solid number 1 pick there.
Okay, so speaking of, now we're on to this week after a brief recap of last week. Let's talk a bit about the Catholics versus convicts rivalry, because in the 80s, Notre Dame was a pretty good team. They had Lou Holtz, Tony Rice, and a few other good players whose names I can't remember. And then there's Miami, who's they have Jimmy Johnson, great coach, terrible hair decisions, but still a great coach.
Miami was the team of the 80s. So Notre Dame, if you look in their history, they have had a losing record against one program over the series, and that was Miami. So they signed a 10-year deal, and I grew up there. And so in 1981, the Canes and Notre Dame played for the first time, and they played for the next 10 years, so 81 through 90. And the Hurricanes went, I think, 8-2 against Notre Dame.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
and Dan, that was 8-2, including some of those 8 were against elite Notre Dame teams.
Not like this year's Notre Dame team.
So Lou didn't get there till what? Lou got there in 87, right? And so, I remember being at the Jerry Faust game, which was his last game as Notre Dame head coach, and Miami won. I think it was 58-7, and just was and Jimmy Johnson was putting third string guys in, and of course those guys wanted to score touchdowns against Notre Dame, and they did, and Miami got in trouble for running up the score. Meanwhile, Notre Dame's been running up the score on people since since 1900s.
Since Newt Rockne.
Right, exactly. So, Notre Dame got a taste of their own medicine. Look, it was always – it's funny now because, that was such a great rivalry, if you can call it a rivalry. Because as far as I'm concerned, Miami got 2 bad calls in South Bend. That series should have been 10-0 Miami's way, but and that's not a rivalry, 10-0. But hey, those last 2 games at Notre Dame were, those were once for the ages. And like you said, that was the Catholics versus convicts thing. And all good things came to an end. Miami lost a lot of magic when they left the Orange Bowl. When Notre Dame showed up in the Orange Bowl, they didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, and Notre Dame's probably been running up the score since people died playing football.
It's true. We'll see. Notre Dame a tough week last week. Lost to the Thundering Herd. Hottest conference in football, baby.
Sun Belt Conference. And speaking of Notre Dame, like, Marcus Freeman was not the right guy for the job. I mean, he shows up, chokes against Oklahoma State in the Fiesta Bowl, chokes against Ohio State, and then just gets blown out by Marshall.
Look, to his credit, I mean, you can't take on Mike Gundy, expect to beat the mullet in the bowl game.
I mean, yeah.
The mullet wisdom is tough to beat, but yeah, Freeman, I think Freeman better turn it around fast because, I don't know how much patience they're going to have with him. I think they brought him in and expected him to win right away.
Really? They don't give you a year or two?
No.
I mean, I think he'll get a year, maybe two, Keith. But he was like, here's the thing, right? Is he was basically the player's choice, right? Because they wanted to do a big search and everything. And they're like, wait a second, we got the guy here. He's our defensive coordinator. We're going to play hard for him. Anytime I see those situations, the guy has generally a shorter leash than somebody that the athletic department brought in.
Yeah, he's like, all the players love him and they have his respect, but it's Notre Dame, a very storied program, and when you lose to Marshall, the players might start to question him.
100%. No, well said. Yeah, I mean, the loyalty of last season goes so far when you're 0 for this season. They're playing my Tar Heels, so you know who I'm rooting for in that game. But Notre Dame has some good players. I think they've got a problem at quarterback. That's really pretty glaring.
And then we have Brian Kelly. He went to LSU a week after saying he wouldn't leave Notre Dame, and, well, fairly, he's not doing much better either.
Yeah, I mean, Ed Orgeron's looking pretty smart right now,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the cupboard was bare, and the SEC West is so tough. I mean, if you take one sub-conference in college football, I mean, that's the toughest one, right? I mean, look, you look, it's loaded from top to bottom. Even though Texas A&M suffered a vicious L last week, Arkansas is pretty good this year. Auburn may upset Penn State today, so it's good stuff.
Yeah, and another thing about, another big thing is we were talking about Miami. Hurricane Mario, Category 5 hurricane, is about to hit College Station. Mario Cristobal was a linebacker during the 80s, and he was the coach at Oregon, won a Rose Bowl. Can he return Miami to dominance?
Oof, good question. I think, like I said before, I think they lost a lot of magic when the Orange Bowl went away. So they really need a home field. I think that matters a lot.
Where are they?
Hard Rock Stadium. It's like the Dolphins Stadium, but
it doesn't feel like home?
No, it's barely in Miami. It's right on the Dade Broward line.
It's in Coral Gables.
Yeah, no, it's way up past Coral Gables. They've been talking about building a stadium in Coral Gables, close to the campus, but I don't know that the zoning folks in Coral Gables, they write you a ticket if your grass gets above 3/4 of an inch. Seriously, so they're a little, they're a little too old school for putting a stadium in there. But his big thing, Cristobal's big thing, is he wants to do what Jimmy Johnson did, which was, Johnson really cut the state at Tampa across to Orlando, and everything south of there. They wanted to win those recruits. If they do that, he may run a very good program. I hope he can.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that was answered in like a really polished, professional, political advocate kind of way. Like, what's in your heart? Like everyone hopes that he's gonna bring the magic and like restore the glory
and recruit outside of only Miami-Dade County.
Like, what are the opportunities and risks? Like, how's he supposed to navigate it? Do you think that he can do it?
Well, and I think you can relate, Keith, being an SC fan.
Yeah.
I think it's tough. I think the advantages the schools that were in the inner cities had in the 80s and 90s, and even the early 2000s are gone, right? I think, both Pete Carroll and Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Erickson, Howard Schnellenberger, Miami, like they really feasted on those kids, that city football environment.
Yeah.
Now it's become so polished. You have things like
and national. Everything's national.
Right. Everything's national now. And so you don't like that. So that used to be a real geography was a huge advantage for Miami. And I'm not saying that the high school football in Florida still isn't wonderful. It is. But I think I think in some ways the rest of the country's caught up, and like you said, it's national. Like there are kids that can play all over the place,
And it's like it's not like Bobby Sue and Jimmy go to the prom 1950s style. Like it's not just national athletically, like economically. So like it's the landscape's totally different.
Yeah, and the big thing is resources. I mean, Miami, and here's where I think both schools like Miami and USC now are at a disadvantage is you don't have the resources of a giant state school like Alabama or Ohio State or even Texas, right? Like, I mean, Texas put together an NIL deal where every lineman, right? So they've got a first, second, and third team of linemen, right? The third team's mostly the freshmen, redshirt freshmen. Those guys each are getting $50,000 a year NIL wise. Because things are bigger in Texas and they got oil money and everything else. So while Miami, I'm not saying they don't have an active booster program and everything else, but I think in a lot of ways the smaller schools, especially the schools that are in cities and are private versus public, I think they're at a disadvantage just because they have a smaller alumni base.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But now let's talk about the other team. Texas A&M. They just lost to Appalachian State, who has a history of upsetting teams. Like they beat Michigan State in Ann Arbor. I think they beat Penn State in Happy Valley when they were elite. And now they just beat A&M, who had an amazing recruiting class in College Station.
Yeah. Jimbo Fisher, I guess the joke that was going around this week is he's Mr. February, right? Because he's really good at winning the recruiting. He's number one in recruiting, but have they had a 10-win season since he's been there? I mean, everyone points to last year, but everyone forgets, they beat Alabama last year. They still lost, 4 or 5 games?
Like 5, yeah, I think.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just and they have no quarterback. I think that's their bigger problem. In App State, I mean, look, App State gave North Carolina all they could handle, too.
And they're not a joke.
They're not a joke at all.
I think this is, the parity of college football, right? That's the answer coaches always give. But I think you look at like the Sun Belt, and I think also COVID helps because schools like App State, you got kids now, they got an extra year, right? So instead of a 5th-year senior, you have a 6th-year senior. So just do the math. You got 16% more practices than a school like A&M did, right? Because those kids all stayed, whereas the kids at A&M, everyone's declaring early for the draft or going to do this, going to do that. Those kids at App State, this is like, hey, we're never going to play in the pros. We got one more year of football. We're doing that.
Yeah. And now on to our next topic.
Well, wait, is the next topic about the game today between Miami and A&M?
Yeah, who's going to win?
Well, you know me, I'm in the pocket for Miami. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Tyler Dyke, if it's done right, puts Tyler Van Dyke on the national stage in a way he hasn't been. I think he's a really talented quarterback. Miami's got some injuries at receiver, but I think if Van Dyke plays like he's capable of, he looks a lot like Kenny Pickett, like a similar game. If he plays like he's capable of, I think it's going to be tough for A&M to stop him.
Yeah. Now on to our next topic, which is Oklahoma. USC's, as I call them, for the offseason, they were USC's farm team. Lincoln Riley left. They took Caleb Williams and all their good players, and Oklahoma was left with nothing, but they got UCF transfer Dylan Gabriel and Brent Venables. How do you think they're going to do?
I mean, this is an interesting week. I think Oklahoma's a very good team. This week with Nebraska hurting, and I'm not saying Nebraska's a great team, but I think Nebraska keeps it close. I think that they have been I don't know if disrespected is the right word, but this week everyone is, when you're the butt of everyone's team.
They're playing with a chip on their shoulder, that's for sure.
And, they've played Oklahoma a lot recently in the past few years, and they've kept it close pretty much every year.
Yeah, and look, that used to be the
classic rivalry.
Yeah, Keith and I Thanksgiving, that's what we used to watch.
Yeah,
was, Nebraska and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So look, I think Lincoln Riley's a great coach. I think Caleb Williams if he stays 3 more years with him at USC, I think he'll win a Heisman Trophy. He's super talent. It's Oklahoma. We'll see how Brent Venables does. He's a great defensive mind. We'll see if he can keep the whole ship together.
Yeah, now what about Scott Frost? He got fired. He was on the hot seat for a while, and they finally decided to pull the trigger.
And like
Because,
what?
I mean, he lost to Georgia Southern and Clay Helton. I mean,
Why
really?
couldn't he do it, Dan? Why couldn't he put it together?
I think the expectations were a little out of whack, right? Like, they brought him in, they brought in a hero, right? And like, oh, our hero's going to lead us back to the promised land. He played under Tom Osborne. It's going to be the same. And I think the reality set in that, look, the cupboard was bare in a lot of ways. They have some talent, but they didn't have the same talent like they have at Oklahoma or at other parts of the Big Ten. I mean, Penn State, Ohio State. I mean, heck, I think Nebraska made a big mistake when they joined the Big Ten, right?
Yeah.
Because it's similar to Maryland too. I think that their recruiting base got diluted. Nebraska used to get great players from Texas, great players from Oklahoma, because they knew like they wanted part of those rivalries. That's gone, right? Like Nebraska never really had a rival in the Big Ten.
Right.
Yeah.
Ooh, we're gonna play Indiana this week. No one cares.
Yeah,
right,
and
exactly. So. And look, you know me, I'm Big Ten biased. All the good Big Ten teams are in Illinois, right? I mean, we all know this.
yeah.
But hey, I think they're gonna. It's funny too, Keith, because like they fired what's his name, Solich, right? Solich had like 8-10 win seasons, and they still fired the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on like Scott Frost, he had a few undefeated seasons at UCF, but UCF doesn't really play anyone is the problem. Then they get one big upset against Auburn in the Peach Bowl, and bam, oh my God, he's gonna be the next like Jimmy Johnson or whoever the next elite coach is, and Nebraska hires him, but it's like, welcome to the Big Ten. It's different from the American Athletic Conference.
My heart for real, like, my heart goes out to that guy because, like, he put his heart and soul, like, as the deputy AD or someone fired him, someone senior official fired him and said, basically, it's too bad he poured his heart and soul into the job. Like, he gave it his best shot. It's a brutal game, and
it is. But I also think, even though that was the way, because he's a hero, right? You can't trash the hero going out the door. But like when he gave his quote after the Northwestern game, like, "Oh, my assistants need to call it."
Yeah.
You kind of go, "Wait a second, dude."
Like, he called that one onside kick during the Northwestern game in Dublin, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah. No, there was some questionable stuff that he's got to take responsibility for. I just think the thing I think is funniest out of the firing was they did right by the guy. I mean, if they would have waited till October,
right?
He doubled his money for firing him now. So
they only had to wait like 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks, and it goes from $16 million to $8 million or whatever the number was, and so. Yeah, I'm sure.
Dan, I gotta manage my career better. Where instead of like taking these high risk, difficult jobs that are good for public health but are unremunerative, I gotta be looking for much more attractive golden parachute opportunities where I just go mess something up and then I get a golden parachute and I never need to work again. It's actually brilliant professionally.
Yeah, in some ways it is.
Scott,
it's like, if you're Scott Frost, what do? You try to coach again?
Whatever you want.
Yeah, he still has a ton of money.
But he's going to go to TV. He'll do TV. He'll be on the Big Ten Network next year, making sitting in a chair, making $500,000 a year. Never has to touch the $16 million Nebraska gave him. And then it's like, hey, you know what? In 2 years, everyone forgets.
Yeah. That is it for this week.
No. We have one last topic.
No, we don't.
Can I get one more topic in?
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, I have a struggle. We like Catholics versus convicts. It's catchy. We need like more. It's Mormons versus ducks. You're kind of stuck with ducks. There's no Oregon-themed word that starts with M that we can come up. You're a catchy phrase maker. You got anything for us there?
Yeah, I would say the University of Nike by proxy versus LDS. And you have God versus shoes made with foreign labor. How about that?
Dan, thank you for being our guest today, and have a great day.
That is it for this week. We will be back next week with another episode. That is it for today. See you next week.